We also had convection, which requires the flow of a fluid. So we talked about how you have an oven, and a normal oven operates by which mode of heat transfer? Radiation, right. So you have infrared radiation primarily that is emitted by that burner inside of your stove. But in a convection oven, it adds in a fan. And so not only do you have radiation, but you have the flow of fluid inside of your oven. And that makes for much quicker, much more even heating times in a convection oven. That's why convection ovens are so sought after. And then finally is radiation. This is the primary method that your body releases heat, is through radiation. Most of the thermal energy in your body is through radiation. I want to look at this conduction one more time. I forgot to bring this last time, so I brought it today. In this, I have a couple of different blocks. Let me tell you a story. So I have a daughter. She's, what, 11 now? Ada, is her name. And she used to complain about her sheets in her bed. Because she would, in the winter time, she would go to bed and it's like, oh, daddy, the sheets, they're so what? The sheets are like cold, right? They feel so cold when she has that. So she would always want to just not lay on the sheets, but she has like this fuzzy blanket. She would just lay on top of the blanket and then cover up with another blanket. But you know, why do you have sheets on your bed if you don't lay on the sheets, you're going to say? So we would fight about it. She would always think, oh, the sheets are so cold. And I would always tell her, Ada, those sheets have been in the same room as the blanket all day long. And in fact, they've been in thermal contact with the blanket all day long. So if they're in thermal contact with the blanket, then we would say that they are in what with the blanket? What? He said that. In what? Okay, yeah, they're conducting heat between one another. So they are in thermal, starts with an E, ends with an M, equilibrium. So they're in thermal equilibrium. That means that they have the same temperature. So actually, even though they're in contact, there's no heat flowing between them. Because delta T for the sheet and the blanket, since they have the same temperature, delta T is 0. And so if the difference in temperature is 0, then there's no transfer of heat between the two. So anyway, they're the same temperature, I would say, right? The sheet and the fuzzy blanket, same temperature, right? You agree? All right, so I have these two blocks. I want you to touch them just with one finger and tell me which one is colder. This one, right? Okay. This one's colder. Like I can count. Colder. Not everybody. Which one? This one's colder. Yeah. That's colder. This one's colder. Okay, y'all agree? Like, how about 12 people touch it? And everybody said this one's colder. So I have a thermometer. We'll measure them. They've been in that bag all day long, by the way. Like all night. They've been sitting in the same bag, all snuggled up next to one another, touching one another all day. This is an infrared thermometer. It measures the infrared radiation that comes off of a body. So, I'm not gonna. So our forehead is 93 degrees. Like even though your core temperature is 98.6, often your appendages have a lower temperature than your core temperature. So let's try to 72 degrees Fahrenheit and 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're actually exactly the same temperature. And they shouldn't be surprised. You don't believe me. You shouldn't be surprised because they've been in thermal contact with one another for days now. Tell me which one's colder. This one's colder. I just measured them. And I just told you they're exactly the same temperature. Do you not believe me? Did you touch them before? Right. This one's colder. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So I want to try something else. And you'll need to get up and look. So if you're in the back, you'll stand up, sort of come around. You'll get it? Yeah. Okay. let's see, which one's the cold one? This one over here is the cold one. Can y'all see? I'm going to put some ice on the cold one and the warm one. I want you to tell me what you think will happen. What do you think is going to happen to the ice? You think so? On the warm one? Probably, right? Because it's warm, as you say. Okay, let's see. It's a special chemistry. All right. You all ready? Here's the warm one. Huh? Look, this one's not doing anything, and this one's almost completely melted. This was the cold box. Was it? It's not because of the texture. Look, it's not doing anything. It's hardly any water at all. So what's the deal with this cold block? First, why does it feel cold? And then second, why is it melting the ice faster than the warm block? Which we know they're really the same temperature. Neither one's colder or warmer. They're both the same 72 degrees or whatever. Huh? It's not like that. No such thing. Any ideas? They're not the same material, right? They felt different, right? One was textured, as Maddie said, but it's not the texture. What's the difference in the sheet and the fuzzy blanket? Huh? No, the surface area is the same. You're close. Look at these, the K, A, delta T, and D in that equation. What's different? What's different for the sheet and the blanket? Are they, one of these is plastic and the other is aluminum. What's different? The thermal conductivity. So the cold one, as you say, is the aluminum block. And it's not really colder, it just feels colder because it has a higher rate of thermal conductivity. And what does that mean if you have a higher rate of thermal conductivity? It means when I touch it, the heat from my finger flows more quickly into the aluminum than it does with the plastic. And so that's why it feels colder, because it's like it's sucking heat out of my finger faster than the plastic one, because the plastic one has a lower rate of thermal conductivity. It's a better insulator than the aluminum block. So it feels warmer because it's a better insulator. Likewise, the fuzzy blanket also feels warmer. It's not really warmer, it's really exactly the same temperature because it's in thermal equilibrium, it's been in thermal contact all day, and so it's exactly the same temperature. Okay? Did you ever have like a little cousin or niece or nephew or whatever complaining about the sheets? You tell them. They just have different rates of thermal conductivity. They're exactly the same temperature. So shut up and stop your whining. That's not what I said to Ada. Alright, don't talk to her that way. Alright, let me get in this water. All right, let's go on to energy in the body. We'll probably wrap up this chapter, maybe not today, but on Thursday. All right, is today Tuesday or is today Thursday? Today's Tuesday. Y'all like the lights on or off? Off. You can see better? All the lights. That's too much. No, you don't like that. I can't even see you. Okay, so energy in the body. Our governing principle with the body is that we'll assume a conservation of energy. And do you remember what we assumed if the conservation of energy was true? That we assumed something about the system. We assumed that it was a closed system, that there's no energy in or out. Now, of course, that's not really true for the body, that you have food going in,
and then you have energy going out in the form of thermal energy, or the energy that you're doing. So because of that, we must account for energy that leaves and enters the system. Entering in the form of food and leaving in the form of activity, our thermal energy, and we'll talk about that, our basal metabolic rate and our total metabolic rate. So when you do work, you consume energy. And remember, when we're talking about work, we're talking about this work is equal to a force times a displacement. So anytime I apply a force over a certain displacement that requires a certain amount of work, then that consumes energy. And that's just an application of the work energy theorem. That if I do work, or if I do work, that I consume energy or require energy. And you can do this for both macro and micro purposes. So macro would be like physical activity. Like exercise, or just, just life, walking around, doing things that you do. And then micro purposes would be the things that go on inside of your body. And we'll sort of clump all of those things together with the BMR. I think that was on your quiz, wasn't it? Did y'all get that question right? Basal metabolic rate, right? That's your basal metabolic rate. Food is the primary source for energy, and it can be stored for short term and glycogen, and long term are fat storage. And your body uses both of those. The unit of energy is a calorie, capital C calorie. Let's see, I think I'll describe this later. Yeah. A calorie, a small c calorie, I'll describe the difference, though you might know. A small c calorie is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 milliliter of water. And 1 milliliter of water, by the way, is the same as 1 gram of water. So a calorie, if you have 1 milliliter of water and you put a calorie of energy into that water, then it's going to raise the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. Remember the bomb calorimeter? He blew up the little piece of fruitcake, and then he tried to see, okay, how much did it raise the temperature of this water? If it raised the temperature by 1 degree Celsius, well, if it was a gram of water and it was 1 degree Celsius, then that would be 1 calorie. So if it was 100 grams of water and it raised it by 1 degree Celsius, then the little thing of fruitcake would be worth 100 calories. Okay? So we know how much energy is required to raise the temperature of substances. That's based on the specific heat. A material with a higher specific heat will require more energy to raise its temperature. That's why the specific heat, for example, of the sand or the water is higher. Which is higher, the sand or the water at the beach? The water has a much higher specific heat. It requires a lot more energy to raise its temperature than sand does, which has a relatively low specific heat. All right, but a food calorie is equivalent. A food calorie, which is 1 capital C calorie, is actually equivalent to a kilocalorie, or 1,000 calories. So when you talk about calories in, say, your chemistry class, that's different from calories that you might talk about in your, I don't know, you aren't dietetics, but in your food, their classes about food. There are 3 food sources for energy: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Which of these is the most energy dense? Is it carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins? Which of those is the most energy dense? That is, if you have the amount of energy, the amount of calories per mass density. Carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins. Okay, let's stop at 30. Okay, so would it change your answer if I told you that lipids is really just a fancy word for what? Fat, yeah. Would that change your answer if I told you that? Do you know which of those is the most energy dense? Fats are the most energy dense. So, yeah, so B, their energy density on average is 4 kilocalories per gram for carbohydrates. And proteins have a similar 4 kilocalories per gram. But lipids or fats have more than twice the energy density, 9 kilocalories per gram. Okay. All of them are important to your body, of course, but they just have a higher energy density. These are called nutrients collectively. But there are other nutrients vitamins, sort of what you think of typically as nutrients, vitamins, minerals. Oh gosh, what's the third? What is the other nutrient? No. Water, right? Water is the other. I don't really think of that as a nutrient, but it is. Okay, so carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, along with vitamins, minerals, and water. Make sure you know the sources. Well, I'll tell you some sources of each of those and their energy densities. You don't need to know the numbers, but just know, sort of that the lipids or the fats have a higher energy density. That's why, butter, lard, those are all really dense in their energy content. Energy from carbs is delivered most quickly. I don't know. Athletes, do y'all still do carb loading? You don't do carb? No, not really. I don't think y'all don't. I know runners that have done it in the past. You ever do carb loading? You want to talk like before you have a big competition that you eat a bunch of carbs? I don't think that's really a thing anymore. Anyway, it used to be. Energy from carbs is delivered most quickly to the body. From lipids, it's the most slowly. So if you're a cyclist and you're out riding and you just need like a quick something to pick you up, then it's going to be fairly high in carbs or sugars that'll give you a quick burst of energy. Whereas if you were to eat something that's high in fat that would not really help you in the immediate future, that it would be released more slowly. Nutritionists recommend a diet. I don't know if this is still legitimate. I think that I think that diets probably go from fad to fad, but nutritionists tend to recommend a diet that's 50 to 60% carbs, 20 to 30% fats, and 15 to 20% protein. And that's what it says in your book. I'm not a dietitian. Is that the right word? I'm not a dietitian, so that may be different now. Anybody know? Is that what dietitians recommend now? We should get Dr. Scott in here to talk about it. Y'all know? That is what they recommend? Yeah, okay. 50 to 60% carbs, 20 to 30% fats, and 15 to 20% proteins. Know some sources for each of these. Carbs, lipids, and proteins. What's some carb sources? Okay, yeah, plants. What type of food items though? Rice, pasta, potatoes. I'm just going to abbreviate. I don't know how to spell potatoes, but it's not hot like you think of. It's just potatoes. Bread, that's what I said. What about lipids or fats? Oils, animal products, oils, butter, and proteins.
Nuts.
Yeah, I like nuts. You like to eat nuts? They're really good for you. Nuts, eggs. I like eggs too. Meat, fish, etc., etc. Okay. Know some of the different sources of carbs, lipids, and proteins. All right. I want to show you a video first before we do that next clicker question. All right. So, know your different food groups, know where they come from, know what they do. Let's try these clicker questions. There are 3 sources of energy from food: carbohydrates, what, and what? All right, let's stop at 42. 42. Okay, what is it? Carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Very good. So B is the right answer. Hey, why is an obtuse triangle never happy? Because it's never right. That was a math joke. Y'all get it? Okay. Let's try this one. The following describes thermal conduction. That's the equation we've seen before. Thermal conduction is 2 kilocalories per second. If you double the thickness of that material, what happens to the new rate of thermal conduction? So, in thinking about my 2 objects, and I have the thickness of my material is here. If I double that thickness, what happens to the rate of thermal conduction between them? It was 2 kilocalories per second. Now what is it going to be now that the thickness or the length of that material is doubled? All right. Everybody's doing either A or C. It is one of those, A or C. So if you have something different. All right, let's stop at 105. 105. Okay, so I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to talk you through it a little bit. So I have, say, I'm standing from here to a fire. I put a length of a metal rod into the fire. And there's a certain rate of thermal conduction where energy is going from the fire up the rod and up to my hands. And so I can feel the warmth in the rod that I'm holding. But what happens if I double the length of that rod? And so I'm twice as far away from the original source of energy, where I now have twice the length for it to go through. What's going to happen to the rate of thermal conduction? Will the energy go into me faster, or will it go into me slower? If it's faster, C is the answer. If it's slower, then A is the answer. If I double the length of that material, what happens to the rate of thermal conduction? All right, that's a lot better. I'm going to stop at 43, 40, or let's go to 45. Just guess if you're not sure. Okay, A is right. And A is right there. Okay? Now, we can look at this mathematically, and that's really the way you should approach it. You can approach it just thinking about the situation, and that's great. But if I double the length of the material, or the thickness I call it here, if I double that, then that means I'm going to halve this side. Because I have a half on the right-hand side of the equation, is this in the denominator, And so I have a 2 in the denominator over here, which is the same as multiplied by half. Okay? You'll see questions like that where I ask you about what happens if I do something to the thickness or the length. I'll call it the length. I know thickness isn't really a very good word, but the length of the material, the cross-sectional area, or the change in temperature, the difference in temperature between these two materials, and then also the rate of thermal conductivity. So think about how changing those variables will change the rate of the thermal conduction. All right, let's do work done by the body. It's kind of interesting. So macroscopic work. Remember we talked about like exercise or just sort of moving around, the things that you do with your body. Those aren't really a very big part of our energy consumption. So just take, for example, to climb one flight of stairs. To go up one flight of stairs takes a certain amount of energy. And that amount of energy is equal to m times g times h. And so if you imagine that I am 70 kilograms, typical person is about 70 kilograms, and they go up a flight of stairs, and say that flight of stairs is, I don't know, 3 meters tall, then the energy that they burn in moving up that flight of stairs is 70 kilograms times 10, that's g, meters per second squared, times h, which is 3 meters. So that's what, 700 times 3 is about 2,000 joules. But 2,000 joules is approximately equal to about a half of a food calorie. So about a half a calorie is 2,000 joules to move up one flight of stairs. So if we imagine that you go to the gym and you're on that stair climber, and say you do 200 flights of stairs, which is a lot of stairs. Y'all ever been on a what's it called, stair climber? If you climb 200 flights of stairs, then that's only burning about 100 calories. That's kind of alarming, right? Like that's like one of those little bags of cookies, the 100-calorie bag of cookies. You ever seen those? Right? But you know, if you've climbed 200 flights of stairs, if you've ever been on one of those things, it tells you how many calories you've burned, right? And it's a lot more than 100 calories. It's hundreds. It's because like these charts will tell you that if you climb an hour of stairs, then that's about 400 to 600 calories. So why the difference? Why is there the difference between the 100 and the 400 to 600? What's the difference between these two numbers? This one, the 100 calories, is the amount of energy for you to change your gravitational potential energy. To go from here up 200 flights of stairs, you've changed your gravitational potential energy by 100 calories. Why then does it require 400 to 600 calories from your muscles to actually just move your gravitational potential energy by 100 calories? Why is it so different? There's a lot of other things, right? In fact, your body is not very efficient. I mean, we talked about that in chapter 2, right? That your muscles, the way that they're set up, not really that efficient. They're good for the things that they do, but it requires great forces to move small things. And similarly here, your muscles are very inefficient. They typically have only an efficiency of about 20%. Oh, that's not spelled correctly. So if you climb or if you climb stairs for an hour and you burn 500 calories, by what amount have you increased your potential energy? Let's do this as a quicker question. If you have a 20% efficiency and you burn 500 calories, how much have you actually changed your potential energy? Is it A, 400, 200, 100, or 300? Actually, we'll do it in order. 400, 300, 200, or 100. A, I'll explain again what I'm asking. You climb stairs for an hour, and your body burns 500 calories. What now is your new gravitational potential energy? By how much have you increased your gravitational potential energy? Have you increased it by 400, 300 calories, 200 calories, or 100 calories? If you're 20% efficient, by how much have you increased your gravitational potential energy? Remember when I talk about efficiency, a 20% efficiency means that if I put in a certain amount, then I get 20% of that back in some usable form. So if I put in 500 calories, I get 20% back in some usable form. And the usable form would be to change my gravitational potential energy, that I go to a greater height. And so how much have I increased my gravitational potential energy? If I have a 20% efficiency. All right, you're doing pretty well on this. Feel free to ask your neighbors what they put. A lot of you have the right answer, but a lot of you don't too. So let's stop at 130. Well, I say, 20 of you have the right answer. About 12 of you don't. 130. Okay, D is the right answer because 20% of 500 is equal to 100 calories. So I put in 500 calories, but I only get 20% of those out. And 20%, which is a fifth, right? 20 over 100 is 1/5. 1/5 of 500 is 100. You'll have a question like this on the test. Every test has them. So go through and practice some of those old tests. You'll get the hang of it. If you're still having trouble just with the math, come see me. But the numbers will be simple. It'll be like 20% or 25%. That would be a quarter. What if it was 25%? Well, I wouldn't give you 20. What if you put in 100 calories and I say you have 25% efficiency? How many calories are you getting out in a usable form? 25. You get a quarter, right? 1/4 of that, which is 25. How much energy are you losing here? How much energy is just lost to the system? Let's try that. We'll use the same options. And tell me how much energy here is lost. Of the 500 calories, how much is lost? Goes into heating up your body. Goes into the friction on the stairs. Okay, good. Why do we have this right so far? Let's stop at 30 seconds. 30 seconds. What? Huh? How much is lost? How much of the energy is lost? You put in 500. You have 20% efficiency. How much is lost? How much of the energy is lost? It'll be lost to thermal energy, primarily. Lost to processes within your body. I'll stop at 53, okay? 53. You're good? Okay. Awesome. A is right. If I put in 500 calories and I get 100 calories out usable, then the lost energy is my 400 calories. When I say it's lost, it's just not usable. That when your body produces heat, that's effectively energy that's, you can't really use that again. Why did the little boy eat his homework? Because the teacher said it was a piece of cake. They say that you should never say that something is simple, because it's only simple really if you know how to do it, right? And so sometimes I say that, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to make you feel like, oh, I don't know how to do this, and so it must, I must be stupid. That's not really what I mean at all, and that's not true either. But that sometimes we say things are simple, but they're really only simple if you know how to do them. If you don't know how to do them, then they're really, really hard, right? So y'all can forgive me. All right, let's look at metabolism. Metabolism includes biochemical reactions in the body. that use energy to build up and tear down substances. And the metabolic rate is just the rate at which you have the energy usage in the body. Rate of energy usage in the body. I don't know if you've ever done this, if you've ever witnessed it. I've never witnessed it. I've seen it on YouTube or whatever. But to measure a metabolic rate, what you do is you submerge a person into a tub of water. And you measure the rise in the temperature of the water. It's just like the bomb calorimeter. It's sort of like the bomb calorimeter, except they're not exploding the person like in a little bomb. But you have this big tub of water. Let me draw it blue. It looks like lava water now. And then you put a person inside of it, and you just wait. You measure the temperature of the water, and how long it takes the temperature of the water to go up a certain amount will tell you something about their metabolic rate. There are other ways to measure your metabolic rate that you can look at your age, your level of activity, your muscle mass, your bone mass, and you can also measure your metabolic rate in that way as well. Your metabolic rate includes your basal metabolic rate, and that's the rate at which your body converts energy into thermal energy while resting. This is just really the energy that's required to live. So how much energy is required to run your brain, for your heart to be pumping, for you to breathe, for you to do all those involuntary things that your body does. If you're just laying on the couch all day, nothing wrong with laying on the couch some days, how much energy does your body consume? So typically your BMR is about 65 calories per hour. So roughly in a day, how many calories would you use? If you use 65 calories every hour, just for sitting around, not for activity, but if you do that, then how many calories are you going to use in a day? You have any idea? Well, let's see. I can calculate it here. So I'd say 65 calories per hour. Think about my dimensions. I would want to multiply this by 24 hours so that the hours cancel out. And if I do that, let's see, that's about 1,600 calories. So your basal metabolic rate consumes about 1,600 calories. So if you consume about 2,000 calories a day, most of that food energy is going into just making you live. Younger people, and tall, thin people, ironically, and maybe that's not fair, but tall, thin people tend to have a higher BMR for two reasons, or for separate reasons. The younger people, like little kids, they have a really high BMR just because they're growing, right? Like they go to bed at night. And my wife, I don't know if this is true. Maybe y'all can tell me if it's true or not, since you're health people. She says that growing pains are like a real thing, that she used to have growing pains. Really? Really? Because my son, he'll complain sometimes that his legs hurt at night, and my wife says, well, it's because his legs are getting longer, that he's having growing pains. Y'all believe that's true?
Yes.
It sounds sort of like pseudo. It's true? It's a real thing. So, like, kids are just getting bigger. Every day they get bigger. And so that requires a lot of energy to just build the bone mass, build the muscle mass, for them to get bigger. Tall, thin people require just more energy to heat their bodies because they have a much higher surface area, or really a larger surface area to volume ratio. Now, like normal people have a pretty small surface area to volume ratio. But if you're really tall and you're really thin, then that means that you have not very much volume on the inside, but you have a lot of surface area on the outside. And that person is just going to give off a lot of heat. They're going to lose a lot of heat, and so they're going to have a higher BMR just to keep their body warm. All right? So younger people and tall, thin people have a higher BMR. And those people, they can eat pretty much anything they want, right? I'm sure you'll probably know people like that they can eat pretty much anything they want. But normal people aren't really that way. The total metabolic rate includes the BMR, and then it also includes any other activity. So this is the total energy to run your body. I'll put run in parentheses, or in quotes, to run your body, including any activities that you engage in. So if you're an NFL football player, then you might need to consume 8, 9, 10,000 calories a day. But if you're sort of a normal person, it's 2,000, 2,500 calories a day. I think it's sort of the typical recommendation. The BMR may require about 1,600 calories a day. That's a capital C. But the TMR can be a bit higher than this, the total metabolic rate, and that's really just dependent upon your activity level. That can be up to about 2,500 calories a day for normal people. But I just want you to notice that your BMR is the bulk of your calories burned every day. So if you want to affect your body weight, exercise is a great way to do that, but diet is also very important because your BMR, your exercise, that only affects that little extra bit of calories that you burn. Exercise can also affect your BMR as well, that as you build more muscle mass, that tends to burn more calories. It increases your basal metabolic rate, and you're just sort of warmer. You're a warmer person. I remember a few years ago I had some back injuries and I started lifting weights. And I never really lifted weights except like in junior high. I used to play football and we had to lift weights in junior high. But I started lifting weights and I just found that it really made me a lot hotter. Like not hot like what y'all are thinking, but like hot, like temperature-wise. That I was just a lot warmer all the time. And it still continues now. And it's just because when I started building that muscle mass, that it raised my basal metabolic rate. So weightlifting is very important for your body, especially for you women, that your bone density can tend to decline quickly over age, more so than men who just have bigger and stronger bones. But that can decline over age. So it's important to lift weights. If you don't do any sort of light weightlifting, you should. So exercise is great for your body. But to really manage weight, you have to cut consumption of calories. And that's hard, right? That's really difficult because we have these habits that we're in and our body needs food, and it's very difficult to do that. Okay? We had a dog. Jasper was his name. Greatest dog ever. And when we got Jasper, he was 6 years old. He was a golden doodle. When we got Jasper, he was 110 pounds. And we said he was cute and all that, but he was pretty bad overweight. Because the people that had him before, they fed him a lot of table scraps, and that was really bad for him. And so we took him to the vet. They didn't really know anything was wrong with him. And the vet said, this dog is really overweight. You're going to shave years off of his life. And the vet told us, you need to cut his food in half. In half. So we were feeding him, this much food, and then we cut it in half, and that poor dog was like he was starving to death. But the thing with the dog is they just depend upon you completely for food. So, we give them what we give them, and then it's not that way with people. It's a lot more complicated. Okay, let's try these clicker questions. We're almost done. BMR is an abbreviation for what? Let's stop at 28. Okay, very good. 100%. That was on the quiz, right? It's basal metabolic rate. Let's do this other one, then I'll give you a joke. The food unit of energy is the what? I'll stop at 25. 25. Okay, good. B is right. The food unit, let's see, some of you put D, and the difference in D, notice that the case of the letter, that the uppercase C is the food calorie. That's equivalent to 1,000 calories. Hey, helium, a helium atom walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "Give me a drink." And the bartender says, "We don't serve noble gases here." Helium doesn't react. Y'all have a good day. Well, I'll let you out a little early.